Dr. Jahnke Roger. Glad I confirmed that. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm really, really excited to be talking to you today.
Oh, what a pleasure. And thanks for all you do to support people in getting inspired to take better care of themselves, be more self-reliant, be thoughtful, critical thinking, empowered.
We'd love that. We'd love that. That would be great. I think that would go a long way if we could get people to feel that way. Um, so you are a doctor and a teacher. Um, and you teach men to fish and you give them fish as well, whatever they prefer, I imagine. and um,
We go with the teach to fish
uh-huh.
model
Yeah.
mostly. Yep, absolutely.
And and you specialize in Chinese medicine. And for people, and I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but for people that seem to have an allergic reaction to such a concept, or people that there seems to be some kind of stigma or chasm in the West between Eastern medicine and their
Sure.
perspective on it. Where do you think that stems from? And and yeah, I guess you can take it from there. But where do you think that stems from to begin with?
Well, I think it stems from the fact that people are inherently judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
That as a part of that, there's the whole idea of people who aren't from my own family or from my own community or from my own country must have something wrong with them in terms of like how they think and perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's how we do it. That's how the humans do it. Now, for myself, I for reasons that I probably can't use rational thinking to explain, I've never really thought like that. I've always been really entertained, interested in, intrigued by, well, what did the people in Africa do? What were the people in Persia doing?
Mm-hmm.
What were the people in what were the Native Americans doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been interested in those kinds of things. And so then if you ask the question, what is Native American medicine? And then you ask like, well, what is Persian medicine? And then you ask like, what is Chinese medicine and the medicine from India and Hawaii and everywhere else?
Mm-hmm.
You find out that the Western medicine is really the only one that acts like this. And so the rest of them say the most profound medicine is in the person. The way to be able to cure a disease is to never have it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
The prevention is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, let's just think about it. An ounce, how many ounces in a pound? 16. So are you saying that for 1 ounce, I'm going to get like better than 16 ounces worth of value? Answer, absolutely. Do you want to sit in a do you want to sit in a doctor's office? No. Do you want to go to a hospital room? No. Do you want to be in the emergency room? No. Do you want to have to go to the drugstore to take a medicine that you probably don't even need? No, and no, and no, and no. So
Mm-hmm.
then I ask this question. If a person has a problem or thinks there's a chasm between where they are and Chinese medicine, I would say not so much what's wrong with Chinese medicine. I would say like, what's wrong with that person? And
Yeah.
the answer is judgment. The answer is colonization. The answer is disempowerment by the, shall we say, by the elite and the medical industrial and the pharmaceutical industrial complex. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, why not say those things?
Right. Right. I mean, I think you should. And I think that those are all very rational answers. And I think that, yeah, what I would even say is probably coupled with, and just to perhaps give more of a benefit of the doubt type of perspective, because it's funny, I didn't give much credence to this, not because I was necessarily judgmental, but because I never really thought to even look for it. I was never exposed to it. It never came up in anything that I'd ever learned, in my life, and having gone, K through 12 and college and, and electives and then all the books that I've read since college, which I love to read and I love to learn. it it's taken me a very, very long time to even get here. So I think that there might be something, and I wouldn't call it necessarily malicious, but systematic, almost inherently, about the leaving out this type of medicine and this type of perspective, because it's more than a medicine. It seems to be also perspective.
Yes, it's a lifestyle, a perspective, a paradigm. You know, many would call it a way. You know, like in the Chinese, they have the Taoist way,
Hmm.
and the Buddhists have their eight path, eight paths of righteous way. And Jesus said, think about how to do this by just answering the question, how am I doing it? Because I am the way. So it's just fascinating how, yeah, I said the word colonization a few minutes ago, and
Hmm.
then what you said was it it never showed up in my world. So then could we say
Yeah,
that you were colonized?
I think you could. I bet you could, and that's really what I've been noticing more and more about my life, and more and more about my education, because and I think it's fascinating, and something that I've been lamenting personally about people that I've noticed in my life. I try to choose, I'm very selective about the very close friends that I have and the people that I choose to confide closely with. And one criteria that I really require is that they have to have something that I look up to them about. That's something that's very, very important to me, that I feel like I could learn from my friends, or something I admire that makes me want to be better in a different way. So if one friend is better, about balancing his relationship with his wife and his friends, I look at that with extremely high regard. Or if someone is really
Mm,
good with their kids and educating them, that's something else. So, um,
wow. I
well, I
love
try,
that.
yeah, and I think that at a certain point, you almost I don't think that you can colonize a curious mind, but you could kind of quash out curiosity. And something that I've noticed is that people feel like once they finish school, or once they finish a form of education, they're pretty much done, and they pretty much are done learning, and they're pretty much done evolving in their lives, and then the rest of their life is pretty much plateauing, or following a particular generic career path. Which is not a problem necessarily, but I think that you can do things to enrich it, and we
Yeah.
should hopefully have plenty time to be able to do both of that, you know?
I love that. And what is the thing that happens at the end of your education as you go to something called a commencement? And a commencement like is not the end. It's like named as the beginning.
Correct, correct, correct. So, without further ado, I would love to touch a little bit about maybe some of the basic premises of Chinese medicine, and what's interesting is the more that I've read about this, the more I've learned it's interdisciplinary. Whereas people that are extremely successful in the world of Western medicine become extremely successful due to their isolation, their ability to isolate and be good at one specific nuance, or part of the body, or aspect of medicine. Whereas I think the Chinese medicine perspective takes a whole, right?
Yeah, I like that question a lot. So there's two levels of how wholeness can be pursued. The first one is that if you have a specialty, then you're specializing in that, but then you also know that everything about a person's life outside of that specialty is also important. And typically, specialists tend not to do that. And so, a kind of holistic approach, or integrative medicine approach, or functional medicine approach always has the idea is that no matter what the key issue is, it's inside of everything else about that person, including their genetics, their lifestyle, their relationships, the extent to which they honor and get into a relationship with nature, the extent to which they're curious,
Hmm.
the extent to which they're willing to 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 learn more about their own lives. So there's that. then if we say that Chinese medicine is more holistic or generalized, that is true, because in Chinese medicine and in all of the great shamanic versions of medicine, everything is related and codependent as opposed to being isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But still, a person who is a doctor of Chinese medicine or a doctor of Ayurvedic medicine or a doctor of Arabic traditional medicine,
Cool.
all of those traditions are holistic generally, but then practitioners may specialize in, there's like, for instance, the specialty of Chinese gynecology is very different than Chinese neurology.
Right.
Those are still specialties,
Mm-hmm.
but those are specialties that happen within a holistic context,
I see.
as opposed to in spite of the other aspects of a person's life.
I see. So how do you diagnose people? And when you do, how does this wholesome perspective come into play? So if someone, what kind of
Yeah.
ailments do people tend to come to you with? And what do you do about that?
Yeah. So the limits on what kinds of ailments are zero. So in other words, everything from aches and pains to acute, shall we say, viral type activities, everything about the digestive system, everything about the cardiac and vascular system, everything about the pulmonary system, everything about the brain and depression and anxiety
Wow.
and reduced, shall we say, cognitive capacity, all the way from minor dementia to, severe Alzheimer's and so forth.
Wow.
So how that works is that when a person comes to me with any one of those, what they call their diagnosis, the last thing that I do is pay attention to that. The first thing that I
That's the
do
final
is
consequence.
first thing that I do is I want to find out about them. How do they live? And what are the things that they are interested in? And say, for instance, if you run into a person who has a health problem, who has had a life dream, and that life dream has wilted and died,
Mm-hmm.
then no matter what their diagnosis is, there's going to be some feature of that diagnostic challenge that's associated with the fact that that person has lost faith in their highest ideals. So if we can create a playing field in
Mm-hmm.
which the diagnosis is a small endpoint in a long process of an entire life, and to untangle some of the things from the entire life portion and put that back on track. And of course, that's going to be nutrition, hydration, uh, rest. It's going to be like passion. It's going to be, to the extent to which lightheartedness has died, and that, despair has risen, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so then one of the most important things is here. So my company is called Health Action, and Health Action has two components. One component is what we call holistic life planning. The other component is called mind-body practice. So as a doctor, I'm doing a whole lot less treatment these days and a whole lot more helping people to make a holistic life
Uh-huh.
plan
Uh-huh.
and to have a mind-body practice. Because if you have a holistic life plan and a mind-body practice, that's the foundation of, shall we say, the way to live, so that no matter what therapy goes in on top of that is likely to be more successful, because the ground of being is
Right.
being nourished.
Your foundation is is healthier. How many people come to you uh, for preventative maintenance, we could call it, as opposed to once the tire's already flat? How many times are people coming to you and saying, "I'm already sick," and then you say, "Well, let's get started from the top," versus how many people come to you and say, "I I know I'm not living very healthy, and like I have to figure out a way to balance everything."
Yeah. So at the peak of my medical practice, I would say that 5% were preventive.
Mm-hmm.
At the peak of the work that I do now, I would say that I just don't even deal with when people say this, I'm coming to you because I have a disease. I'm hardly even dealing with the disease because Chinese medicine is based on dealing with the person.
It's fascinating. It's really fascinating. So what can you walk me through perhaps a case or a situation, and you could leave obviously, keep the person anonymous, but perhaps the case and then a step-by-step process as to how the journey would go to or what and then maybe some are there I know that this question is difficult because people are so different and everyone is so different, our genetics are different, but are there basic simple things that people can overall do that generally is a rule for humanity to elevate our foundation or to strengthen our foundations?
Sure. So yeah, so and this has been the core of our discussion so far, because as every time we kind of go in the direction of, who are these people and what are they complaining about, and what type of expectation do they have given the fact that they've been to other doctors and now they're
Hmm.
coming to you. I keep saying, and I will say again, but I will give you a specific circumstance, which I think is really poignant. But it doesn't matter who it is or what the problem is. The first level is going to be, who are you?
Okay.
The second level is going to be, now, by the way, we have to put genetics aside because you can modify the extent to which your genetic predisposition has an influence on your life by having a better life,
Oh,
but you can't
fascinating. Right.
change your genes.
Right.
So you can't overall change the genes, but
Hmm.
you can change the extent to which the genes are compromised by the behaviors in your life, right? Okay, so back to it. What happens is that we're going to look at nourishment, hydration, exercise, stress management, all of that. So now allow me to give what I think is a striking example. And so most people who are listening know that heart disease is the major, um, terminating factor for people who die of anything other than just old age or, horrifying, miserable dementia. And so now check this out. This is like amazing. Used to be that when you had a concern about your heart, you would go to a cardiologist. A cardiologist is a person, just what it says, someone who studies the heart.
Hmm.
So you cannot find a cardiologist anymore. The only thing that you can find is a cardiovascular surgeon. The cardiovascular surgeons know almost nothing about how to be able to create a healthy heart or to prevent heart disease.
Mm.
What they know how to do is diagnose whether you need surgery today. And if you do not need surgery today, then it's inappropriate, of course, for them to suggest that you should have surgery. But now you're on their list, you're in their system, and they will see you every 6 months
Hmm.
until
You need surgery.
you need surgery.
I've heard so many anecdotal stories of people that go to the doctor says you're fine, and then they go home and a week later they collapse or something, God forbid, happens. And you're saying that a lot of times it would be hypothetically because there's well, you don't meet the criteria for operation right now, and therefore there's not much that I could do for you.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if they can get it up to the point where you could take a medication then that's a good piece in the middle. And
Sure.
by the way, there's lots of research that shows that a lot of cardiac medication has numerous negative side effects, and therefore the cardiovascular surgeon who recommends cardiovascular medicine is to some extent accelerating the time period between now and when you're going to finally need the thing that they want to sell you.
Mm-hmm. 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 I
Now, check
see.
this out.
Yes.
Let's just go with a couple of other things. So,
Yes.
one of the most important problem in the cardiac side of things is obstruction of the arteries in the heart. And so there's something called cardiac artery obstruction. And then there's something called plaque.
Yes.
And there's a couple of kinds of plaque. There's hard plaque and there's soft plaque. So it turns out that if you have a lot of hard plaque, it's from the past because plaque is always soft first, then it becomes hard. So a person might go to get a CT scan and have a lot of hard plaque, but they're relatively well. And so then the question becomes, is having a significant amount of hard plaque dangerous? And the answer is no, as long as you don't have soft plaque, because it's the soft plaque that gets caught in the obstructive arteries. If you have, and this is generalizing, I mean, there'll be cases on one side where it's not even a problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be cases on the other side where it's really imminently a problem and you really need to pay attention to it. But I'm talking about, out of every 100 people, the 80% in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question isn't, do I need to take medication or have a surgery because I have hard plaque? The question is, am I making soft plaque? And so then the doctor will tell you if your cholesterol's high, you're making soft plaque. Well, that is wrong. It's just
Okay.
wrong. It's
Why?
just absolutely wrong.
Why is
And
that
so it's
wrong?
been proven it's been proven to be wrong by scientists, like people doing real science. And what it turns out, and maybe you're to some extent aware of this, but a lot of medical specialties have ended up in very strong relationships with pharmaceutical companies.
Yes.
And so what happens is that the American Cardiovascular Association is getting a lot of contributions from the pharmaceutical industry, and
Sure.
therefore they are in a kind of, you know, scratch your back kind of relationship. And so it turns out that a lot of, and this is true of diabetes, it's true of uh, uh, many autoimmune
Sure.
disorders. It's very true with early onset dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that what happens is that doctors are trained to be able to support people by saying, well, you're on your way to this, so here's a medication for you. But they don't say anything about how to manage your life. And actually, the thing that they could have said about how to manage your life would have replaced the fact that you needed that medicine or that medicine even made any sense for you at all.
Sure, sure. And I imagine that the people that most staunchly approach this probably are not living the lifestyles that would enable them to be optimally healthy, right? The people, I'm thinking of the people in my life that would be the most vehemently opposed to what you're describing right now. And not many of them, if any of them, live a balanced life with the things that you're describing: hydration and exercise and stress management and sleep. And I mean, most of the times
Yeah.
they're checking none of those boxes and then complaining about constant ailments that they have.
I cannot debate you on that. And one of the things that that happens on a fairly regular basis is that people in certain industries
Yeah.
will be promoting something to the public that's a part of how they make their 100+ thousand or even their $1 million a year, but they don't let their family members.
Hmm.
So it's telephones, like there's all this, stuff about the technology people who invent all this technology that we're all using, but then they don't let their own kids
Hmm.
use phones.
Sure.
And there was that whole thing, back a ways. There was that thing called um, uh, COVID, where, the main guy was like saying that everybody had to stay home, but
Yeah.
he
I plead the fifth.
wasn't.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, that guy. So, it's not uncommon for people to say, don't do what I do as I say.
Right.
And that's really pretty darn far out of integrity
Mhm.
and really absent of the kinds of principles that I know that you and I are really intrigued to be able to support people in understanding.
Right, right, right. Can you tell me a little bit, if anyone doesn't know about this place, but the Esalen Institute?
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah. Esalen Institute. So the Esalen Institute is one of a number of very interesting, shall we say, we'll just use the word retreat centers that were developed during the 60s and 70s, in the last millennium. That means,
a good
the
one.
last period of 1,000 years. Yeah, the golden age and all that, right? So Esalen was the first. It's in Big Sur, California, which is south of San Francisco and north of where I am in Santa Barbara. The Omega Institute is in the Hudson Valley in New York,
Hmm.
and Kripalu Yoga Center is in the Berkshire Mountains
Sure.
of Massachusetts.
Yes.
And all of those organizations are, they're just the heart of the empowerment, whether it's psychological empowerment, spiritual empowerment, practical empowerment, holistic empowerment, everything to do with like natural food and utilizing herbs
Hmm.
as medicine in preference to drugs. Those organizations, and typically you go there and you do a retreat. Often when you're on that retreat, you go to some classes, do a lot of yoga, tai chi, qigong, meditation, and so forth. And the food is fantastic.
Hmm.
And the camaraderie with all the other people who are there, they're all self-selected as curious about personal development and compassion, kindness, uh, social engagement, and so
Hmm.
forth. Amazing. Esalen Institute, amazing. Kripalu, Omega, amazing. Everybody try to find time to look these things up and plan a trip there. These are some of the most important institutions in the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And the research that they do is extremely rigorous too, right? I mean, like it's not just head in the clouds. It's, I mean, from everything that I've read about it, it seems that some of the most legitimate people in many of their fields have come and gone through these grounds, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is because again, I would like to get the names out there. I'd like to get the exposure out there, and I'd like for people to that are listening to be, aware of the fact that this stuff doesn't exist in some kind of 1,000-year-old relic. This is very much alive and breathing, and it's fun.
Yeah.
I've read this amazing book. Uh, it's called The Last Great Dream by Dennis McNally, who is the Grateful Dead's biographer. He and I recorded an episode together. He was great to talk to. And one thing that the book describes that I had no idea anything about was how San Francisco was the hotbed of Eastern culture, because that was essentially the first place that everyone would get to from the East. The first place you'd land is San Francisco, and so that was the birthing grounds. And I guess California and the Pacific Northwest too is really the birthing grounds of a lot of this kind of um, culture in America, right?
Yeah, so I've been to the Chinatown in LA,
Hmm.
the Chinatown here in Santa Barbara. We had like a little tiny Chinatown like a really long time ago. The Chinatown in San Francisco is spectacular.
Hmm. Yeah.
The Chinatown in Portland, amazing. The Chinatown in Seattle, amazing. And it's interesting that a lot of these ports of entry are places where a lot of people who are trying to get away from the dynasties in China. The dynasties in China are you know, pretty abusive of the peasants. So when a lot of the Chinese people figured out that they could be a part of like the American experiment, and so they came and they were building railroads and they were building they were helping with the gold mining and so forth. And of course, a lot of them were Chinese doctors, and a lot of them were uh, kung fu wizards.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting. The word kung fu means skills development. So it doesn't mean martial arts. It means skills development. So medicine, the art of tea. I'm drinking Golden Monkey right now. The art of calligraphy, the
Mm.
art of herbal medicine,
Mm.
the art of Tai Chi, the art of Qigong, the art of meditation. All of those things were basically a part of almost everybody's life in China. So when those people came here, they were often like, I don't know if you ever saw that TV show Kung Fu, but that Chinese guy that was the star of the Kung Fu show, he looked like a kind of a wandering vagrant,
Hmm.
but he was actually a highly skilled uh, Taoist and Buddhist monk
Hmm.
with on board medical skills, philosophical skills, and and of course like radical kung fu.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And this goes back to the interdisciplinary idea that, and again, the physicist that I spoke to in Seattle, Sidney Perkowitz, he and I were talking about the fact that philosophy and physics went together forever until relatively recently, and philosophy and science were together recently, and now scientists, at least in the West, seem to have a problem with the idea of philosophy, of philosophizing about life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, check this out. So when I was a kid, we learned something in school that by the time you went to school was gone.
Right.
And the small little note on this is that scientists used to be called natural philosophers.
Mm.
Scientists
Yeah.
used to be called natural philosophers, but most people who are, I'm just a relic from a former time, basically, but most people who were even born like 10 years after me have never heard of the fact that science used to be called natural philosophy. So there's some colonization for you right there.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot. My last medical question, and then I think I want to get into a little bit more of the practicality between the Tai Chi and the Qigong, and maybe some philosophizing about the mind, body, and consciousness. But the last, I guess, medical type of question specifically is inflammation. My wife has been on this whole health journey, and especially when it comes to women's health, but also with, I believe, dementia and also it's a form of cognitive health. The biggest, I think the inflammation is basically what a lot of these symptoms could be drawn down to. Or how much does the mind body, or how does Chinese medicine tackle the question of inflammation? Is that the same idea that you are out of that you are essentially out of calibration and you need a
Oh,
reset?
good point. That is very good. I'm glad you said the last part of your sentence. Because if we would say, were the Chinese aware of inflammation, the answer would be yes. And did they use the word inflammation to describe when they were aware of inflammation? No. So it's the same thing. Inflammation
Sure.
is out of calibration
Uh-huh.
uh, from the Western uh, biochemistry and neurophysiological
Hmm.
standpoint. The Chinese would say that what is out of calibration is the qi.
Okay. This could lead us into the
Now,
conversation. There we go. Yes.
yeah, so the qi is what I would call, well, big lesson on qi. Qi is everywhere, and that means absolutely everywhere. So then where isn't there a where? And anywhere that there's not a where, there still might be chi. But we know that anywhere, chi is everywhere. Okay, so then what's the difference between human chi and tree chi? We'll just take a look. That's a tree. This is a human. So the function of a tree is tree chi. The function of a human is human tree,
Okay.
human chi. Okay, so then can the parts of the human have their own chi? Is there hair chi, whiskers chi, throat chi, thyroid chi, heart chi, liver, kidneys, spleen, everything chi? Is there knee chi? Yes, because when the chi is in the knee, that is knee chi. When the chi of the world is in the heart, then that's heart chi. It's still world chi, but it's in my heart. So it's a little bit complex for people in the Western world to track all of this. But when you start to talk to physicists, philosophers, and shamanic healers and so forth, it all makes sense that there's something universal that infuses everything every everywhere. So then if the paradigm is described as chi coordination, then that would be like functional coordination.
Right.
And then if you went over to the European side, and you would say, well, the Europeans didn't talk about chi; they talk about neurological, the autonomic nervous system, and the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and so forth. So, how would you describe chi, the functionality from the Chinese view, in terms of the functional language of the Western view?
Yeah.
And the answer would be autonomic nervous system balance, which is called homeostasis,
Hmm.
and which would be called the pH balance
Yeah.
of the fluids in the blood.
Hmm.
It would be the capacity to manage right brain requirements and left brain requirements. So,
Can you
what
break
are
down
all of
what
those
those
things?
requirements are in case someone doesn't know? Because I've heard the two, but can you elaborate on what the right brain requirements and left brain would be?
Let me see if I can remember.
Sure.
So, I always think of it this way, that the right brain
Hmm.
is associated with the left hand.
Okay.
Why? Why? Because the left hand is, or the left part of ourselves is usually associated with more creativity or femininity, and the right side is more associated with masculinity and productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do something that's left-sided, like write poetry and make
Yes.
music and so forth, that's the right brain. My right brain is over here. And then when we do something that's more practical, that's the right hand
Mm-hmm.
or the left brain.
And you're saying that in
And
an ideal world, everyone should find some sort of balance between exercising those aspects of their brains.
typically we would say that an integrated human being would have respect for creativity and would have an interest in creativity at the same time as having respect for practicality and an interest in practicality. One would be respect for maybe like dreaminess, and the other one would be respect for productivity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very cool. Anyway, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. So you're talking about this homeostasis, and then the right brain, left brain, and the other
And
way.
then
Yeah,
the pH of the fluids and so
correct.
forth. So the key point is that qi is how you talk about harmony and balance in Chinese medicine, and uh, homeostasis and balanced pH is how you talk about harmony and balance of function in Western medicine. So
Mm-hmm.
they're both discussions about harmony and balance. So now let's go to the inflammatory process. It turns out that in Chinese medicine, we would say that when a person is out of balance and they have inflammation, we would say that's a dysfunction of the qi. And there's a lot of complexity about that that we won't go into. And then in the Western world, we would say that here are the causes of inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's now make a recommendation. And that is that we know that if a person gets a proper rest, they're going to tend to have less inflammation. If a person gets proper hydration, they're going to tend to be less overcome by, shall we say, abnormal amounts of inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
If a person is nourished properly, they're going to have less inflammation. If they tend to exercise reasonably more, they're going to have less inflammation. If they have a way to be able to say, I'm going to lower my stress reactivity, they're going to have less inflammation. So all of those, I just talked about 5 of them, there's more. All of those are either when they're not attended to, causes of inflammation, and all of them when they are attended to appropriately, resolutions for inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go now to the question, which is one of the biggest questions that there is in the world, and that is, I get the rest part. I have a hard time sleeping. I'm going to do something about that. I get the exercise part. I know that I should be doing more exercise. Okay, I'll do more exercise. I understand the the hydration part. I will do my part to get more hydration. But what I don't understand is the nutrition.
Mm.
And so there's one absolutely profound simple answer to the nutrition question. And it isn't, should I be keto or should I be vegan? The question is, can I be anti inflammatory in my nutrition? The answer is yes. And if you go to the internet and you simply just type in anti inflammatory nutrition, you will get dozens of sites which will tell you in a very specific list, what an anti-inflammatory diet is. So the Mediterranean diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. The vegan diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. The ketogenic diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. So then you could say, well, where the heck is all this inflammation coming from? There's just one answer, and that is junk food,
Yeah.
snacking.
Yeah.
When they do the research on, is vegan diet more effective than ketogenic diet? No,
Really?
no. The answer is, if you do research on either of those diets and you do good research, you're going to get the same answer. This vegan diet and this ketogenic diet, they have the same power to maximize well-being because they are both anti-inflammatory. But to do good research, when you get people into the study, they have to agree to the rules. And the rules to be able to get good information about vegan diet or the ketogenic diet is that the participants can't eat junk.
So yeah. so the key is so the key to being a healthy person is to be a disciplined person. Essentially.
Well, but I would say curious,
Okay.
because when I was a kid, and I'm imagine, you never heard of a natural philosopher, but I'll bet you have heard people say that you should be more disciplined.
Yeah, sure.
When I was a kid, when anybody would say that, we would all go, the big D, and so like, you're such an asshole. But discipline arises from intel
Right.
that's
Knowledge.
based on my aspiration.
Yes.
So if you start with aspiration and then you say, how am I going to get from where I am to where I want to be? Curiosity. What's going to come out of curiosity is learning.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that with the bait at the other end is that you get what you want.
Yeah.
And so the thing called discipline that goes in the middle is, it kind of pales in terms of being a problem, because the goal is so, intriguing, inspiring, attractive, the gold. I want the gold, so like, how am I going to get it? Well, I'm going to have to figure some things out. I'm going to have to get a hold of myself. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going for the gold. So sure, I'll, get a little more rest. I'll drink a little more water. I'll look up an anti-inflammatory diet.
Yeah.
I will consider the possibility of giving up snacking, to the extent of the fact that I for a while I had this idea that potato chips were health food. Well, it turns out the potato chips are just cooked in seed oils,
Mm-hmm.
and that will give you a heart attack faster than anything.
Right. 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 Yeah. I think anecdotally, at least, to emphasize your point, I I had a relatively early life crisis when I turned 25 and I realized that I wasn't a Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen. I was very disappointed in myself. and 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 one thing that, growing up Orthodox Jewish, but being 25 and not having any idea as to when you're getting married or who you're getting married to is relatively rare. And
Hmm.
and so and yeah, and it sort of hit me. I was reading the weekly Bible portion about Abraham at that time, and how he was 100 when he had, or 90 when he had his first kid, or in his late 80s, early 90s when he had his first kid, and and I was just thinking to myself, this guy must have waited so long to be a dad, and kept on thinking to himself, what am I going to do to be the best dad that I could be when that finally happens? Because, God told him it was going to happen, and he only seemed to ask him one time out of the 60 years between when he was first told and when it happened. And I was like, I'm freaking 25 years old. I mean, this guy waited till he was 80, and I'm sitting here feeling bad for myself. And I said, I'm gonna. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do or who it's going to be or when it's going to happen, but I know that I want to work on preparing myself to be the best that I could be at it when it comes around. And that immediately, like that thought immediately changed everything in my life. And I remember exactly where I was,
Mm.
and I remember the consequences, the dominoes that fell, which started with speaking of finding homeostasis or balance, or what's the Chinese word for, I guess, what with the way, the middle ground? Um,
Yeah, the chi harmony and balance of chi, or the middle way, or the Tao.
Yeah, and I started implementing creativity on a daily basis of learning a new instrument, and I started exercising on a regular basis, and I started and all the things. Then the other things that I felt would be necessary to be a good husband and father eventually, and that's really, I mean, everything else is downstream of that. You know, my career is downstream of that. The way that I make money is downstream of that. The way that I spend my time is downstream of that, and my habits and my efforts. So everything was around that goal. And when I realized I don't know when it's going to be, but all I can do is just prepare myself best for when that happens. My perspective turned on like a switch, and it hasn't gone. You know, there have been times where I've taken my hands off the wheel for a couple of seconds, or anecdotal amount of time, but overall, that's all it took for me to open my mind and realize, if I do want to do this, then why am I shutting out these ideas before I even take a look at them? If I do really
Mm.
want to be like that, then how am I going to go ahead and close the door to this without having any idea as to what they're talking about? So I hope that I hope that that could be something that happens. So that being said, this has been one of the hardest pills for me to swallow. I don't know. The perspective of Chinese medicine and the mind body connection in particular, which, it's funny, I've never not believed in, but I've been skeptical in the way that I hear it manifested in
Mm.
seemingly miraculous or outrageous stories, but seem to have a lot of either testimony, veracity, repeatability. You know, that certain people are able to repeat these things pretty often. Has I don't know what to do with this, um, but it has to do with chi, I imagine, right?
Well, but chi is everywhere, right? So
Correct.
if it's the chi of the stone, no. If it's the chi of a person, then which part of that person is it the chi of? It's not the chi of the nose. It's not the chi of the toes. It's the chi of choice making. And the choice making is associated with consciousness. So
Okay.
we're really talking about consciousness and how to be able to, shall we say, nourish the chi of consciousness. And
Yes.
basically, we talked about it a minute ago when we say, if I have an aspiration, then I know that there's going to be something between where I am and getting the fulfillment of that aspiration. What are those things? And then when you decide what those things are, that's consciousness. And then actually doing them. So, if I have 10 things that I need to do to be able to get to the outcome that I aspire to, then first of all, I have the consciousness of deciding that I have that aspiration. Then I have the consciousness of deciding which of the 10 things that have to happen I'm going to do first,
Mm-hmm.
and then second, and the whole process of prioritizing all the way from 1 to 10,
Yeah.
absolutely all of that
Mm-hmm.
is the chi of consciousness.
Okay. I imagine that most people on a scale from 1 to 10 are probably below 5 on their chi of consciousness, I imagine. So, what can we do, myself included, to exercise? I imagine that it's a muscle similar to almost anything else, right? Similar to writing, similar to exercise, similar to your ability to express yourself or articulate yourself. I imagine that your consciousness and tapping into that, whatever that even means, right? And maybe we could try to define or kind of provide some kind of direction to understand that on a tangible level that people can actually try to implement. Um, how do you exercise? How do you work on this? How do you tap into your consciousness? What do you do to make yourself aware? Because especially, and listen, I know that we live in a world today that puts billions and billions and trillions of dollars into psychology and marketing and advertising and all these data collection to make sure that we do not engage with our consciousness and to make sure that we are constantly kept at odds with our consciousness. So for people that feel lost, people that are that have no idea, grew up with social media and with their phones and without this kind of sense of self awareness or sense of even self that they're even aware of. Um, what can we do?
Oh man, I really hate this question.
And we could start
Um,
with from the ground, but or break it down, but because I know it's a big
uh,
question that requires
well,
a big answer. So
the main thing is to believe in the fact that you're allowed to aspire. And I think that's pretty easy. I think that, the Declaration of Independence says that, the Constitution says that, when people bring themselves together to create a state of united, principled living,
hmm
basically says that. And so then if we go to the first question of, well, then if that's possible, why is it that people aren't doing that? You already answered it. You
no,
already
I know
said,
why we're not doing it. I want to know how to get there, how does someone that's not even know, like if someone's listening to this, right, and they've never thought about these questions to themselves, then what do they do? How do you start? Where do you go?
well, like I said, you have to believe in the fact that you're allowed
Okay.
to have an aspiration.
Okay.
And then once you believe that you're allowed to have an aspiration, then you have one. Then at some point along the line, you say, I want to be Bruce Springsteen or Bob Dylan. And then you realize, well, that's a little out of reach, apparently. So should I make a course correction or should I just commit suicide?
Right.
And, someone like yourself would say, well, I'm going to course correct. I'll start a podcast, something like that. Um, but it's first of all, is to actually believe that it's allowed. And I can tell you that a number of young people that I know and care about,
hmm
they do not believe that.
hmm
And
hmm
so they will live with the consequences of that. And it's not, I've done everything that I can, shall we say, in those relationships. And so eventually what happens is that people who are kind of successful, like myself, who want to help other people be successful, we end up working with the tiny little percentage
hmm
of all the people that we run into who actually believe that they're allowed.
Yeah,
So that's the first thing.
I see.
So then the second thing has to do with this whole idea of choice making. Um, and it is hard for all of us to figure out, like, well, what am I going to do next? And, if I've tried this 10 times, should I do something else? Or should I do this another time, like the 11th time? And some of that is going to be, some of that is going to have to do with something called destiny that I don't have any idea about how to be able to predict. And some of it's going to have to do with genetics. And I have no idea how to predict that. Although we did say that you can't change your genes, but what you can do is change the atmosphere that your
hmm
genes are in so that you have a better chance of, shall we say, outdoing that genetic predisposition, which would basically kill somebody, but not kill a person who's, et cetera.
Yeah.
So then to me, the whole thing kind of goes to, what can I do that doesn't cost anything, that has some kind of historic, traditional, or scientific, um, shall we say, rationale behind it. So, what is the easiest thing that we can do? And the first easiest thing is to say to ourselves, I'm allowed. So you could just say that, I'm allowed. And then I would say chanting, I'm allowed, a lot in your life is a pretty big deal.
hmm
because most people are chanting, I don't think I'm allowed.
Yeah.
But then the next one is that there's something that we can do, and it only takes a second, and we'll do it right now, and that is adjust on my posture, deepen my breath, and bring my mind to presence. So then there's the chant, I am allowed, and then there's the chant, posture, breath, and mind. Posture, breath, and mind. In the Chinese tradition and in the Ayurvedic tradition and in most of the shamanic traditions, posture, breath, and mind are called the three treasures. I have two versions of three treasures. I have my body as a treasure, my consciousness as a treasure, and the infusion of transcendental, eternal life, or whatever you want to call it, is a treasure. Those are the three treasures: the body, mind, and spirit. There are three practical treasures: posture, breath, and mind. So adjust your posture, lift your head up, drop your shoulders, soften your fingers, deepen your breath, deep, slow, relaxed breath. Clear your mind. Now, each one of those engages the body. So when I say posture, I think adjust my posture. Head on top, shoulders drop, fingers soft. Then when I say to myself, deepen my breath, I can go breathe in, breathe out, and my hands go up and down. Then when I say mind focusing on the present, I put my right hand out to one side, my left hand out to the other side, and while I'm bringing my hands together, I say to myself, now, keyword now, on purpose, keyword purpose, with intent, keyword intent. I bring my attention, keyword attention, to the present, keyword present. I mean, that sentence is so packed with power.
Mm-hmm.
So first, chanting, I'm allowed. Second, posture, breath, and mind. Posture, breath, and mind. Posture, breath, and mind. Next, aspiration. Next, what are the steps between where I am now and the fulfillment of my aspiration? Call those action steps. Next, prioritize action steps.
Mm-hmm.
Make the simplest one the first one, and the hardest one the last one. And then when you get to the last one, then that is aspiration fulfilled. Go back, do it again. The easiest way to accomplish this whole paradigm that I'm just describing is to set your sights low.
And that way you could build it into a habit and build your muscle with it. This muscle, this awareness muscle. By the way, the way you're even describing this, I feel like is removing shackles from your brain and body and everything, that I think that we're very reactive on a regular basis, and human beings as a whole, we're so used, and this is drilled to us in schooling. This is taught to us with social norms and societal norms, and that the most of the world has been learning about how to restrict yourself to not be imposing on other people, essentially. And so all the things that you're describing, whether it's physically or verbally, or the way that you're breathing, which I guess would be some kind of combination of the two of them, is literally freeing yourself. It's so interesting that you say that. I was doing a breathwork session one time. I've only done it once, but it was really an incredible experience. And I think I mentioned it to you while we were talking on the phone before we were recording. And towards the end of the session, I guess I wasn't ready to go there yet. And part of the reason I don't think I have gone back is I'm not sure if I was ready to go there. Is part part of the experience that what I was seeing through as a combination of the music and the breathing and everything that was going on was almost desert and brick uh large brick walls like it was a cell and it was a cell but there was no key or lock on the cell. The door was open and I was just in it. And and just as I was thinking to myself, this is weird. Why am I in a cell, that I can get out of if I, and why am I in it if I could get out of it? I felt myself pull myself out of it. And because I'd done psychedelics before and because I've had that experience, I was aware of, when you're following a thought process down or an experience down, and then you could also pull yourself out of that thought process or like a dream, even I've done that where I pulled
Yeah.
myself out of a dream that was getting uncomfortable or scary and uh, and I pulled myself out of this, but I think I need to implement this on. I think in order to be able to tackle this, I need to implement it.
Well, we have a program called Breath Medicine, and we can put the links, I
Yeah,
think.
I would love to. Yeah, I'll put it
So
on the
we
show
could
note
do
caption.
we'll do the links for the Esalen and Omega and the Kripalu. We'll do the links for some of the our programs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you will remind me uh, in your follow up email to me about our time together today, I will I'll arrange for our breath medicine program to go to you. Now, one of the things that's uh, very true about the whole breath thing, remember, it's posture, breath, and mind. And so there's a lot you can do with your body. There's a lot you can do with your spiritual self. There's a lot you can do with your mental, emotional self. And so there's many, many ways to do breath practice. And one of them is that super psychedelic, where you ended up in a cage type situation. But many of them are extraordinarily simple, very easy to pursue,
Mm-hmm.
that do not have any kind of psyche, deranging or reconstructing feature to them. They just have good, solid, practical presencing, focusing, and metabolic enhancing
mm-hmm.
features to them. And so the program that we work with, I developed this over my first breath practice experiences were like in 1963. And so, um, I mean, how many years later is it? And what was I doing in the meantime? Well, I was studying breath practice the whole time.
Yeah, I bet.
And so when COVID hit, I decided I'm going to make a little program on breath practice, call it breath medicine, because it's so powerful, so accessible,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only really four different ways that you can modify the breath. Under those four different ways, there are many versions,
Sure.
but distilled, there's just four different kinds of breaths. And the main one is just breathing in and breathing out. But instead of doing it in a shallow way, doing it in a deeper, purposeful way.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say to yourself, or when you ask me, well, okay, we're all out here and we're kind of stuck and we don't know what to do. And what could we do first? And what's the least expensive thing that we don't have to go anywhere to do?
Mm-hmm.
Posture, breath, and mind.
Mm-hmm.
Posture, breath, and mind.
Mm-hmm.
Posture, breath, and mind. And then say, I believe I'm allowed. I believe I'm allowed. Posture, breath, and mind. And that's kind of like if you want to think of the pyramid as being the spectacular thing that ends up with a point on top and an eye in the middle of it and all this stuff, what's at the bottom? What is the foundation? And I think for what we're talking about here, whether it's healing or fulfilling our aspirations or believing in the possibility of ourselves, it comes down to I'm allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And then something simple that I can do on a regular basis that I have control of, posture, breath, and mind.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask if you can differentiate between the mind and consciousness and what that nuance would be? Because I've been trying to figure that out myself. And people kind of use the terms interchangeably, but I don't know that I think that they're the same things. Because what
Uh,
you seem to describe often tapping into a larger, whatever the word might be, consciousness, force, life, whatever it might be. And I believe, I'm certain, as I believe, I'm certain that exists. I'm certain that that's what life is, at least is composed of. Um, but then we have our minds almost, I think, within that sphere. But I don't
yeah.
know that they're the same things, right?
Well, I think that it kind of depends on who you're talking to and what the circumstance is. Like when we when we use the word mind, it really feels like it's a human thing. And when we use the word consciousness, we know that it has a human application, but it
Right,
has the feeling of being transpersonal.
right.
So what I would say is that's the difference. And you know, the consciousness. There's one version of describing consciousness that says uh, everybody has access to the field of consciousness, but like with our email, there's a firewall between my portion of
Mm,
all consciousness and your portion of all consciousness, to
mm-hmm.
the extent that even though we are both using the same email system, we can't read each other's email, and we can say
Ah.
all kinds of things to each other that are different than each other and not even know that. Or if we happen to be mailing to each other, then we would know that.
So would you say that that study or that knowledge or understanding is a thing that would provide out of body experiences, remote viewing capabilities, stuff like that, that seem to be that where people describe tapping into something else. And what's interesting, from even a lot of the cases that Annie Jacobson writes about in her book Phenomena, is that a lot of remote viewers they have a hard time with words describing what they're seeing. They have to write things down. They have to sketch it out, or they have to draw it,
Yeah.
because a lot of times it
Yes.
doesn't come
Yes.
to them as words necessarily. And I think your firewall description, I've never heard it put that way, but it sounds like an excellent, excellent type of metaphor for what we would be talking about here.
Yeah. And then there are others who would just say, well, mind and consciousness are the same thing. And I think that a lot of physicists do say that. They
Yeah,
do use the word. They do use the word mind.
really.
So I think in the end, it's
Do the
kind of like,
Chinese?
oh, yeah,
When the Chinese use the term mind body, they're talking consciousness body connection, not just
correct.
the thing that's thinking between my ears.
Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, this is another really beautiful little realm to trip around in. In the Chinese language, there is not a word for the discrete mental function from the discrete emotional function. In fact, the word in Chinese, if we the Chinese character that describes how the Chinese have this discussion, the sound of it is xin. It's xin,
Mhm.
xin, but it doesn't mean heart or mind. It means heart, mind.
Wow.
So if you go to Native American or any of the shamanic traditions and they say prayers, I would easily imagine that this could be a Jewish thing or a Hebrew thing, which would be say the prayer
Hmm.
and then say the heart, the emotional self, and the mind are one.
Sure. I mean, that's
So in
foundational.
Yeah. So the Native Americans, they say, pray, 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 whatever it is. And then they say, and now the heart and the mind are one. And then they
Mhm.
say, pray, pray, pray. And now the heart and the mind are one. Now let's pray for the flying species. And now the heart and the mind are one. Now let's think about the mushrooms.
Man, it's crazy that you're
And
saying this.
now the heart and the mind are one. So, I wonder, like, when, I don't have the great fortune of being in an association with an ancient spiritual tradition. I'm caught in the
Yeah, it's wonderful.
problem. I'm caught in the problem of the Protestants who were rebelling against the Catholics who were rebelling against the Jewish,
Mhm.
and all this rebellion and all this non-agreement. I hate all that stuff. But the point is that if we look back into the Jewish tradition, and I actually did a lot of this when I was when I was at risk for being drafted to be in the military for the war in Vietnam.
Mm.
I did a
Glad you avoided that.
huge, yeah, thank you. I did a huge investigation of the Kabbalah,
Oh, wow.
and
Really? What prompted
and
that?
yeah, I wanted to prove that I was crazy.
I see. Okay.
So I would go to my my military draft physical review,
Mhm.
and then when we did the psychological portion, I would say things like, there's no way that I could possibly um, kill somebody because I'm a student of the Kabbalah, and I have progressed to the top. Let's see, the bottom is Malkuth, the top is I don't know, is that Elohim or something like that up
Yeah,
there? But
it's Malchus, I think. Malchut
Malkuth is the bottom.
is the bottom? Yeah? I think it might be the top.
Yeah.
Okay. I
So
don't know.
so Ein Sof, that's it. Ein Sof is at the
Oh, Ein
top.
Sof, Ein Sof. That's right. That's right. There's no ending. All is okay.
Yeah. So I would say to these people, as having had the revelation that I am all beings, you
Gotcha.
can't ask me to kill myself.
Did L. Ron Hubbard come knock on your door after that? I
No, but
see.
who did knock on my door was Aleister Crowley.
No way. Really?
Well, he was kind of like an evil dude, so we
Yeah.
won't pay too much attention
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. But
But I wrote a big long dissertation on the Hebrew ritual magic, and I would hand that out to the psychologists when I would go for my
and did it work? You didn't get
for
drafted?
I did not get drafted.
Congratulations. I'm happy. I'm happy that if nothing else, it was used to it was used to keep you out of a war. That's
Well, I think that it's the Kabbalah, the Tarot, the
mhm.
I Ching. They're all these beautiful uh, ancient wisdom traditions for how to make a decision. So, earlier we were talking about choice making. So,
Sure.
when you go to the Tarot and ask the question, does it make sense for me to try to become Bob Dylan? And then the Tarot says, well, it's a little, early to have such a big idea. You might want to just see if you can figure out how to play the guitar first. Those kinds of things. Those kinds of answers are in the I Ching, the Kabbalah, the Tarot, and all of these, astrology and all these other methodologies for, being reflective
Mhm.
and
Sure.
thoughtful and thinking critically,
Yeah.
with more than one point of view.
I've it's yeah, I can't I'm loving what you're saying over here, and I could first of all, the phylacteries that people wear, we call tefillin in Hebrew, the prayer boxes that people that you might see every now and then. One is on the arm, pointing it towards the heart, and one of them is on your head to signify that you're connecting the head and the heart in whatever.
Oh,
There you go. So you hit the nail on the head with that
beautiful.
one. That was
I
perfect.
love that.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's also funny that you say that to help you keep balance, because I had been feeling particularly out of sorts. That I've been running on autopilot for, if not months, years. And I've been trying to work on regrounding myself. And the way that I've been able to work on that, and I'm making it's going to take more time, but I'm feeling the progress. I feel like I'm being literally reforged with a lot of awareness when it comes to prayer, and where my prayer has become intentional, and I've been breathing through it, and I've been doing a particular exercise. You're supposed to visualize the words. You're supposed to have your eyes closed. You're supposed to imagine the words in red, sorry, in flames, against a black background. And
Wow,
yeah,
that's
and I mean,
cool.
yeah, if you don't, well, and what's you learn a couple of things quickly. Number one, you realize you don't know how to spell anything with your eyes closed, because you're trying to imagine what the letters are, and you're like, oh crap, I don't know how this works. So that forces me to learn. But it it I've realized how little of my time I've spent being. And there's a book called The Path of the Righteous, written by an Italian rabbi named the Ramchal, who has a synagogue that's actually still active now, even though I think he died in the 1700s, I want to say, maybe earlier, but it's still an active synagogue. And one of the first things that he writes about in his book about freeing yourself, essentially, is he gives the example of Pharaoh with the Jews in Egypt, and he goes, he had us working so hard that we didn't even think to stop and realize, like, we don't have any freedom. And I think that in some way, shape, or form, I come from New York, which is which is the opposite from California in a lot of people's temperament. And it's funny because graduating in school, people would show off, and it would almost be an argument or a competition as to who was busier all the time, who was working how more hours, who was busier during the day, and who had to study through the night, how many sleepless nights you had. And like, they wore that as a badge of honor. And the only thing I was thinking about most of the time was why. Like, have you thought about, like, why? Have you thought about, like, this sounds pretty miserable. I don't know. I mean, you're getting paid a little bit more, but you don't get to see your apartment, your wife, your kids, your house, anything like that. And a lot of times we're too busy, I think, to even realize how busy we are. So again, I mean, going back to your advice, which I'm definitely going to clip and just be able to keep that as a clip, that the posture and the breathing and and self permission, I think all this just flows one into the other. And I think that it's absolutely, like you said, all the ancient wisdoms seem to point in this direction. And we're in a fight. It's crazy when we say we're in a battle. It's
Yes.
legitimately a battle for consciousness and humanity. And
And it's in within ourselves as well as in the world.
sure, sure,
But before we go on or conclude or whatever we're going to do here, I really like that story that you referenced, and want to just say for a moment that when the Jews were in Egypt and they were working all the time and they really didn't have time to think about anything other than that,
right.
then it was really like almost like a kind of like a cage in a way. And then when you think of the story of like saying, well, hey, this guy over here says, let's just hike the fuck out of here. And he's got this big, I don't know, magic stick or something. And we're going to run into this big body of water, and we're going to just like go across
Mm-hmm.
because that's our aspiration. And we believe that we're allowed, and we're going to take those steps.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just such a classic archetypal liberation story.
Yes. And the key point of that story is that the water didn't split until the first person chose to step into it. And that's and
Okay.
that's the best part of the story to me, is that they were all standing there panicking, and God said to Moses, what are you yelling at me for? You got to go. And then there was someone named, I believe his name was Caleb, from the tribe of Judah, was the first person to step into the water, and that's when it split. And so, my mom used to tell me the shirt's not going to jump off the hanger and put itself on you. I mean, you, you gotta get dressed in the morning, and and every single time, it's so funny. My mom, she lost her mom at a pretty early age. She was, I think my mom was in her early 30s, and she was telling me growing up, I hear my mom's voice all the time in my head, and I'm going to make sure that you're going to hear mine, for certain things, and and I think it's really, really beautiful. I I'm a little disappointed we didn't get to discuss Tai Chi at all. So perhaps we'll have to save this for another episode. But
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's just do it again and call it the Tai Chi episode.
Yes, but real quickly, last question. My friend asked me to ask you, and I was asking him what to talk about, or ideas to bring up, because he's traveled to the East and he's studied a lot of this, and he wants to know why you think that these ideas are persistent and preserved through the East, and how come they haven't originated or manifested as much in the West, and throughout or they don't come from there.
Well, that is a really good question. That's a question that I kind of think about a little bit and haven't really reached any conclusions on. But I will say this, that the West was transformed from a shamanic culture into a commercial culture.
Mm-hmm.
And while India and China all experienced commerce, what they didn't do was allow commerce to replace traditional values.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that at the bottom line, what happened was that in Asian and other, like some of the native cultures that have been pretty consistent, like South America and what's left of the Native Americans in North America and so forth, those people are dogged on the fact that no matter what else, these traditions stand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Taoism would be a practical application today. And that's how Buddhism would be a practical application today. And that's how yoga would be a practical application today, and how Qigong would be a practical application today. Whereas and the other thing, of course, that happened with the Europeans is not only did they get really royally screwed by the Romans,
Mm-hmm.
but then the Romans got screwed by the Christians.
Yeah.
And when I talk about colonization, what I mean is that when the mind and the heart are colonized by false ideas based on practical application of commerce, as opposed to practical ideas that are revered in the traditional principled sense,
Mm-hmm.
that colonization it's not even just Europeans taking over America or the British taking over Africa, but it's the commercial industrial complex taking over our hearts and our minds.
I see. And can you get and is there so you can you move to a place where that's safer? Would you move to not you specifically, but like if someone were to choose to raise their family in India or China or something like that, then they would ostensibly have a little bit more of that balance, you think, in their perspectives?
I think that if you would have done that before 1975 or something
Yeah.
like that, but
Yeah.
the allure of technology, and it doesn't have to be like high tech now, it could be the allure of the telephone
Sure.
and the television and the capacity to be able to make a very, very compelling movie, that all of those things got associated with fashion, uh, identity,
Mm-hmm.
um, self comparison. So that, all that stuff, I mean, it started kicking in at the end of the Second World War because, people could have a house and a car and all that cool stuff. And then it just depreciated from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that this right now, my ideas generally tend to be placeholder, I think, but and we'll wrap this in a second. But I think that this is, this I think is the final big war of humanity. I really believe that
You're
this
right.
is, and what I've noticed is that commercialism, I guess as you're calling it, eats away at every pillar of tradition. And, and that
Yeah.
could be the tradition of being connected to a nation, being connected to a home, being connected to a family or a community or a group of people around you. It could be, I mean, it's everything. And this commercialism just sucks the life out of it and breaks it up into quarterly earnings. And
Wow.
I think this is an ultimate
I think
battle.
you're so right, man. And
Yeah.
I would really say that if you bring that, I mean, if that is the foundation of what this podcast
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that it could very well be, then I just I hope not. I don't like the word hope, so I'm going to scratch that. I hold an intention for you that you get the cool guests, that you figure out how to do the editing so that it pops, that you have the capacity and the time and the inclination to do the clips and pull out the little gems and really jam those into the Facebook and the Instagram,
Yeah.
and all of those places where people have lost themselves. They can find themselves there too.
Hmm. I believe you. I believe it. Doctor, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope to do this again maybe a couple months from now, but this is so nice and I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Take care.